Imagine standing before a serene river, your thoughts rushing like the current, but suddenly a voice whispers, "Your mind is just like this river. Let it flow." But what happens when you stop trying to control the flow? The moment is electric, your heart pounds as a shift occurs deep within, revealing an unexpected truth about your mind's power. What if this discovery could bring you the peace you've been desperately seeking, the kind that cannot be disturbed, no matter the storm? If this thought captivates you, make sure to subscribe to Buddhism in every moment for more life-changing insights and inspiring stories that will guide you towards inner peace and clarity. The journey to calm begins. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a peaceful river, the gentle murmur of the water soothing your mind. You feel the cool air brush against your skin as the world around you seems to pause, as though inviting you to release the tension that has built up over the course of your day. The weight of your worries, the incessant pressure of deadlines, responsibilities, and the constant noise of life, all of it starts to fade into the background. You take a deep breath, allowing the calm to fill your lungs, and with each exhale, you let go of another layer of stress. In this moment, you are not rushing anywhere, not thinking about anything, but simply existing in the stillness that surrounds you. This is the journey to calm. It is not a far-off destination you must struggle to reach, but a place within you waiting to be discovered. And it begins now in this very moment. It is the gift of presence, the power of being fully immersed in the here and now without worry for the past or future. Too often we are consumed by the pressures of our lives, our minds scattered in 1,000 directions, seeking peace in the wrong places. But peace isn't something we acquire, it's something we awaken within ourselves. It's the quiet in the noise, the calm in the chaos, the awareness that, no matter how loud life gets, there is always a moment we can return to, a sanctuary of serenity in the present. As you take another slow breath, consider the simplicity of this moment. You don't need to do anything or become anything. You simply need to be. And in that being, you will find the peace you've been seeking. It is here, always within your reach. The journey to calm is not about reaching an end point. It is a continuous process of reconnecting with the present, of returning to this place of inner peace, again and again, as life moves around you. This path is ancient, rooted in the wisdom of Zen teachings, passed down through generations by masters who understood that true calm comes from within. Zen is not about seeking an external state of tranquility, but about finding peace within the movements of life itself. The stories shared in Zen are not just lessons, they are living teachings, reminders that we can always return to the simplicity of the moment, to the presence that resides in our hearts. One such story comes from a quiet temple nestled deep within the mountains, where a group of monks gathered each day for their practice. They were accustomed to the rhythms of life at the temple, waking before dawn, meditating in stillness, and carrying out their duties with mindfulness. But one monk, a young novice, had been struggling. His mind was constantly racing, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find the peace he longed for. One evening after the evening meal, the novice approached the head monk with a question that had been troubling him. "Master," he asked, "why is it that I cannot find peace? I meditate every day, I follow the rituals, and yet my mind remains restless. Why can't I find the stillness I seek?" The head monk, who had been listening quietly, looked at the young monk with kind eyes and said, "Do you remember the river outside the temple?" The novice nodded, wondering where this question might lead. "The river flows effortlessly, never struggling, never rushing," the head monk continued. "It flows because it simply is. It doesn't try to control the water or push it in any direction. It follows the natural course of things, accepting whatever comes. Can you be like the river, allowing your thoughts to come and go without struggling to hold onto them?" The young monk paused, realizing that in his pursuit of peace, he had been trying to control everything, his thoughts, his emotions, his surroundings. He had been striving for stillness, but in doing so, he had been resisting the natural flow of life. It was in that moment, as he stood by the river, watching its gentle flow, that he understood. Peace wasn't something to be grasped, but something to be allowed. Just like the river, he could let his thoughts come and go without trying to control them, without holding onto them. In that letting go, peace would emerge naturally. This realization changed everything for him. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but a subtle one, like a shift in the wind that goes unnoticed until you feel the coolness on your skin. From that moment on, the young monk approached his practice with a new understanding. He no longer tried to force peace. He allowed it to arise gently like the river that flows without effort. This story is not just about meditation or spiritual practice. It's about life itself. Too often we struggle against the flow of life, trying to control our circumstances, our emotions, our relationships. But when we let go of this struggle, when we surrender to the natural flow, we find peace. The Zen teachings remind us that we do not need to search for peace in far-off places or in grand achievements. It is already here, in the simplicity of the present moment, in the quiet awareness that comes when we stop trying to control everything. As you sit back and reflect on this, consider the moments in your own life where you have fought against the natural flow of things. Perhaps you have tried to control your thoughts, your feelings, or your environment, only to find that this struggle only brings more tension. Now, imagine what it might feel like to release that control, to simply be present, to allow things to unfold as they will. This is the essence of Zen, the art of being present, of surrendering to the moment, and in doing so, finding the peace that was always there. As we continue on this journey together, let these stories be a reminder that peace is not a destination. It is a way of being, a way of living in the present with open awareness. It is in the simple act of breathing, in the quiet moments of reflection, in the gentle flow of thoughts that come and go. Let us begin this journey now together and see where it leads, embracing impermanence. In the stillness of a quiet autumn morning, there is a tree, tall, majestic, and full of life, standing against the horizon like a sentinel guarding the gates of time. Its leaves are a brilliant gold, shimmering in the light as if carrying with them the very essence of the season. This tree, a ginkgo, stands proud and strong, yet every year it follows the same cycle, a cycle of growth, flourishing, and eventual decline. As the first crisp winds of autumn blow through the branches, the golden leaves begin to fall, one by one, drifting gently to the earth below. It is in the falling of these leaves that we are reminded of something fundamental about the nature of life itself: impermanence. The falling leaves are not a tragedy. They are not a loss to mourn. Instead, they are a natural part of the cycle of life. Each leaf that falls from the ginkgo tree is not a symbol of failure or decay, but a part of the tree's ongoing journey through time. The tree does not resist this loss. It does not mourn the fall of its leaves. Instead, it allows them to fall, knowing that this is part of its life force, part of its existence. Much like the ginkgo tree, we too experience moments in our lives when things fall away. People we love may leave us. Opportunities may slip through our fingers. Plans that we've carefully crafted may be disrupted by forces beyond our control. In those moments, we may feel as though something precious has been taken from us. Yet, if we look closely, we may see that these moments of loss are not as tragic as they seem. Rather, they are invitations to embrace the fullness of life in all its forms. The question, then, is not how to avoid these losses or resist them. The question is how to respond. How can we learn to face the inevitable changes of life with grace and acceptance, rather than with resistance or fear? How can we see beauty in the falling leaves, even when they are no longer part of the tree's glorious golden crown? This brings us to one of the most profound teachings of Zen, the beauty of impermanence. In Zen, there is no separation between life and death, growth and decay, birth and loss. All of these are part of the same great cycle, and in that cycle, there is inherent beauty. The ginkgo tree, with its leaves falling in quiet surrender, is not less beautiful because its leaves will eventually return to the earth. In fact, there is a deep beauty in the very act of letting go, of embracing the changes that life brings. But finding this beauty is not always easy. It requires a shift in perspective, a willingness to see change as a part of life's natural rhythm, rather than something to resist. It requires us to trust that the falling leaves are not the end, but simply the beginning of something new. It is in this trust, in this acceptance of impermanence, that we begin to find peace. There is a story told by a Zen master that illustrates this perfectly. The master lived in a small, remote temple surrounded by mountains. Every year the seasons would change, and with each change the landscape would transform. In the spring, the trees would burst forth with new buds, filling the air with the scent of flowers. In the summer, the world would be lush and green, teeming with life. In the fall, the leaves would turn to brilliant colors before falling, carpeting the ground in gold and red. And in the winter, the landscape would become still and quiet, with snow covering everything in a blanket of white. One year, a terrible storm came through the region. The wind howled through the trees and the rain poured down in torrents. The Zen master watched as the storm uprooted trees, destroyed homes, and flooded the temple's garden. The once beautiful landscape was left in ruins, with debris scattered everywhere. The master walked through the destruction, looking at the broken trees and the overturned stones. As he walked, a young monk approached him and said, "Master, do you see what has happened? The storm has destroyed everything. How can we possibly recover from this?" The master smiled gently and replied, "What has been destroyed? What has been lost?" The young monk looked confused, as the devastation was evident to anyone who could see. But the master continued, "What is gone is simply a part of the great cycle of life. The tree that fell will return to the earth, feeding the soil for new life to grow. The rain will nourish the land and the wind will carry the seeds to new places. Nothing is ever truly lost. It only transforms." In that moment, the young monk understood. He realized that the destruction of the storm was not a tragedy, but a natural part of the cycle of life. The destruction would give way to renewal. And just like the ginkgo tree's fallen leaves, the things we lose in life are not truly gone. They are part of a process that allows new growth to take place. This lesson is at the heart of Zen teachings, that change is not something to fear, but something to embrace. The storm, the falling leaves, the passing of time, these are not signs of failure, but of the great flow of life. And in that flow, there is beauty. We can learn to find beauty in the impermanence of life. We can learn to see the elegance in a leaf falling from a tree, the quiet grace of a river flowing through a valley, the stillness of a mountain after a storm. It is not the absence of change that brings peace, but our ability to accept and embrace the change that is inevitable. In doing so, we find a peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, but on our inner ability to live fully in each moment, no matter how fleeting it may be. This lesson is not just about accepting the big changes, the losses, the endings, the moments of grief. It is also about embracing the smaller changes, the ones that happen every day. The way the light shifts throughout the day, the way the seasons change, the way our thoughts come and go. These small changes, too, are impermanent, and it is in accepting them, in learning to move with the flow of life rather than against it, that we find the calm we seek. In the end, embracing impermanence is about learning to live fully in the moment. It is about seeing the beauty in the changes that come, trusting that each moment, no matter how fleeting, has its own unique value. The falling leaves, the storm, the quiet after the rain, these are all part of life's unfolding story. And if we can learn to embrace them with open hearts, we will find that in the end, we are not losing anything at all. We are simply moving with the flow, in harmony with the world around us. So, as you go about your day, consider how you can embrace the changes in your own life. Instead of resisting the changes that come, can you see the beauty in them? Can you trust that, like the ginkgo tree, you too are part of this great, eternal cycle of life, growing, changing, and letting go, only to rise again? The power of presence. In the soft glow of early morning light, a young monk sat in quiet contemplation, his legs folded beneath him, his eyes gazing out over the peaceful temple courtyard. The day ahead seemed filled with the usual tasks, sweeping the grounds, preparing the meal for the community, tending to the gardens. But his mind was far from settled. Despite his years of training, despite the hours of meditation he had committed to, his mind was restless, caught in the web of thoughts that had become his constant companions. He was consumed with a sense of inadequacy, always feeling like there was more he should be doing, more he should be achieving. But that morning, as he sat in stillness, he felt a gentle shift. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there nonetheless. He began to notice the quiet rhythm of his breathing, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the rustling of the trees outside. Slowly his thoughts began to quiet, and for the first time in a long while he was present, really present, in the moment. In that instant he understood something deeply important. The key to peace, to resolution, to joy, was not found in rushing through life or constantly striving to do more. It was found in being fully present in whatever was happening, right here, right now. The monk had been taught this in his training, of course, but it wasn't until that moment of stillness that he truly understood it in his bones. The relentless pursuit of more had clouded his ability to truly experience life. Only in the present moment could he find clarity and peace. This was the beginning of his journey into understanding the immense power of presence. In Zen, we often hear the phrase "just this," meaning that we need to be fully engaged with the current moment, whatever that may be. It is not enough to simply be physically present. True presence involves being aware, awake, and attuned to everything around us. And this, the young monk realized, was the foundation of his practice. By learning to live fully in each moment, he could solve problems, address challenges, and create deeper connections with those around him. He would come to learn that the key to solving life's challenges lay not in seeking solutions outside of himself, but in the way he approached each moment. Life's most profound answers are often found in the simple, present moment. There is nothing complicated about it. We do not need to search far and wide for peace or enlightenment. It is available right here, in the simple act of breathing, in the awareness of the world around us, in the stillness we create when we stop and pay attention. For this young monk, it was as if a veil had lifted. He realized that by simply being fully present with whatever task lay in front of him, whether sweeping the courtyard or listening to a fellow monk, he could experience a profound sense of connection. He didn't need to do anything extraordinary. In fact, the simplest acts, those we often overlook, could be the most powerful tools for cultivating presence. This lesson did not come easily. At first, the young monk found it difficult to let go of his constant drive to do more, to achieve more. But with time, he began to recognize that the more he tried to force results, the more elusive peace seemed. It was only when he stopped striving, when he allowed himself to simply be, that the answers began to emerge. And when he embraced the present moment fully, he found that each action, each simple task was imbued with a deep sense of meaning. There was an old Zen saying that the novice monk often thought of: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The phrase was simple, yet it held profound truth. It was not the work itself that mattered, but the way in which one performed it. The act of chopping wood or carrying water was not merely a task to be completed. It was an opportunity to practice presence, to engage fully with the present moment. In each swing of the axe, in each step toward the water well, there was the potential for mindfulness and deep connection. This realization came to him in the most unexpected ways. One morning, as he swept the temple grounds, the young monk noticed the way the broom moved in his hand, the way the bristles glided across the ground. He had always seen sweeping as a mundane task, something to be done quickly so he could move on to the next. But today, he paid attention. He noticed the rhythm of the movement, the subtle shifts in the air as the leaves were gathered, the feeling of the ground beneath his feet. With each stroke of the broom, he was fully present, aware of the task at hand. In this simple act of sweeping, he found a deep sense of peace. He was no longer thinking about what he had to do next or what he had done earlier. He was simply present with the sweeping. The lesson was clear. Life itself is made up of these moments. Whether we are sweeping a floor, washing dishes, or talking with a friend, each action holds the potential to be a practice of presence. But to access that power, we must first learn to slow down. We must learn to stop rushing through life, to stop looking for the next thing, and instead focus on what is right in front of us. The young monk's experience with sweeping was not an isolated event. Over time, he began to see every task as an opportunity to practice presence. Whether it was preparing the meal, tending to the garden, or sitting in meditation, he approached each moment with a new sense of awareness. He began to understand that the power of presence was not in the task itself, but in the way it was done. When he performed each action with attention, care, and love, it became an expression of mindfulness. It became an act of meditation in itself. And yet, the true power of presence extends beyond our actions. It is also found in the way we interact with others. Often in our conversations, we are not truly listening to the other person. Our minds are busy formulating responses, making judgments, or planning our next move. But what happens when we listen without distraction, when we give someone our full attention? We may find that their words hold deeper meaning, that we connect on a much more profound level. This lesson became apparent to the young monk one evening, when he sat down with a fellow monk to share a meal. As they ate, the young monk found himself distracted by thoughts of what he would say next, or what he would do after dinner. But as he focused on the sound of the other monk's voice, the warmth of the food, the way the light flickered on the walls, he felt a shift. For the first time, he realized that he was not just eating, but fully present with his friend. He wasn't thinking about the future or the past, he was simply there. And in that moment, their conversation felt more meaningful, their connection more genuine. This was the power of presence. It wasn't just about doing things slowly or with more awareness. It was about engaging with life as it is, with open attention and a quiet heart. It was about living each moment with an awareness that turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. Whether we are sweeping a courtyard, talking with a friend, or simply breathing, when we are truly present, life becomes a form of meditation. The young monk had come to realize that the secret to solving life's challenges wasn't in doing more, but in being more. It was not in rushing through tasks to get to the next thing, but in fully experiencing each moment as it came. And in that experience, he found peace. Not peace as an end result, but peace as a way of being. Peace that existed in the presence of each moment, in the simplicity of being fully alive to the world around him. As we reflect on this, we may ask ourselves, how often do we rush through our days distracted by thoughts of what's next? How often do we miss the beauty in the small things, the quiet moments that hold so much meaning? Perhaps, like the young monk, we can learn to slow down, to be more present in our daily lives, to embrace the simple act of being. In doing so, we may discover that peace, connection, and joy are not things we seek. They are things we already have, waiting to be uncovered in the present moment. The river of thought. In the quiet hours before dawn, a young monk sat by the edge of a peaceful river, his legs crossed in a deep meditative posture. The world around him was still, save for the soft rustle of the trees and the gentle flow of the water beneath him. Yet despite the calmness of the surrounding nature, his mind was far from still. Thoughts came crashing through his consciousness like waves in the river, swirling, turbulent, and relentless. His mind was a storm, filled with worries about the future, regrets about the past, and judgments about the present. He had been meditating for years, trying to quiet his mind, to silence the voices that constantly filled his head. But no matter how hard he tried, the thoughts never ceased. Each time he sat in meditation, it felt like an endless battle with his own mind. He would try to force the thoughts away, only to find them returning, stronger than before. In his struggle to control his thoughts, he felt more trapped than ever. But then, one day, as he sat by the river, something shifted within him. He realized that the more he fought against his thoughts, the more they seemed to multiply. The thoughts were like the river, flowing endlessly, and no matter how much he tried to control them, they would keep coming. What if, he wondered, instead of fighting the flow, he could simply let it be? What if, instead of trying to stop the river of thoughts, he could observe it, watch it pass without getting caught up in it? As he sat by the river, he began to experiment with this idea. Instead of trying to push the thoughts away, he simply allowed them to come and go. He observed the thoughts as they arose, without judgment, without attachment. He didn't try to stop them, didn't try to control them. He simply watched them as they flowed through his mind like leaves carried downstream by the current. At first, this felt strange. The thoughts came fast and furious, like a torrent of water, but he didn't try to stop them. He allowed them to flow. And slowly something extraordinary happened. As he watched the thoughts without reacting to them, without labeling them as good or bad, they began to lose their power. They no longer controlled him. He no longer felt compelled to chase after each thought or fight it back. He simply watched, and in that watching he found peace. The young monk understood now. True freedom came not from controlling the mind, but from releasing the need to control it at all. The river of thoughts would always flow, just as the river outside would always move, but he no longer had to fight against it. Instead, he could rest in the stillness of the riverbank, observing the flow without being carried away by it. This realization was a turning point for him. He began to see that the mind was not the enemy. It was simply a part of the natural world, like the river. The mind's thoughts were like the water, constantly moving, constantly changing. And just as the river could be observed from the shore without being controlled, so too could the mind be observed from a place of stillness. It was not the thoughts themselves that caused suffering, but the attachment to them, the belief that we must act on every thought, chase every worry, fight every fear. This shift in perspective became the foundation of the monk's practice. He no longer tried to stop the thoughts or banish them. He allowed them to come and go, like clouds passing through the sky. He learned to simply witness the thoughts without becoming entangled in them. And in that witnessing, he discovered a freedom he had never known before, a freedom that came from letting go, from not clinging to every thought that arose. The mind, he realized, was not something to be conquered. It was something to be understood. And in understanding it, in observing it without judgment, he found peace. He could sit in meditation and feel the thoughts come and go, like the flow of the river, and still remain calm, still remain centered. The river of thought, once a source of struggle and frustration, had become a source of peace. This is the essence of mindfulness practice. It is not about stopping the flow of thoughts, but about learning to observe them without interference, without attachment. In Zen, we speak of just sitting, shikantaza, where the goal is not to achieve anything, but to simply be present with what is. In this practice, we do not try to push away the thoughts, but instead we allow them to be, knowing that they are fleeting, impermanent, and not the essence of who we are. There is great freedom in this understanding. When we stop struggling with our thoughts, when we stop identifying with them, we begin to experience the natural stillness that lies beneath the surface of our minds. This stillness is always there, waiting for us to notice it, waiting for us to stop fighting and start observing. And it is in this stillness that we find the peace we seek. It is not a peace that comes from the absence of thought, but a peace that comes from the ability to witness the thoughts without becoming overwhelmed by them. The thoughts are like waves in the ocean, rising and falling, but the ocean itself remains calm, regardless of the waves. In the same way, the mind may be full of thoughts, but our true nature, our true awareness, remains untouched by them. This is the practice of freedom. It is the freedom to let the thoughts flow without being carried away by them, to sit by the river of the mind and watch as it flows without fear, without resistance. It is the freedom to be present in the moment, fully engaged with what is, without the need to control or change anything. This is the freedom that comes from embracing the river of thought, not as something to be feared, but as something to be observed, understood, and allowed to flow. The young monk's practice of watching the river of thoughts became a metaphor for his life. He learned that life, too, was like a river, constantly flowing, constantly changing. And just as he could watch the thoughts without being swept away by them, so too could he watch the events of his life without being overwhelmed by them. The storms, the calm, the changes, the losses, they were all part of the flow of life. And in learning to witness them without attachment, he found the freedom to live fully in each moment, without the need to control or resist the natural flow. This practice of mindfulness, of observing the river of thoughts without interference, became the key to his inner peace. And it is the key to our peace as well. When we learn to stop fighting with our thoughts, when we stop struggling to control the flow, we discover that the mind, like the river, can become a source of stillness and clarity. The river of thought will always flow, but we can learn to sit by its banks, watching it move without becoming lost in it. And in that watching, in that presence, we find the peace that was always there, waiting for us to notice. Finding peace in simplicity. In the quiet of the early morning, as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the windows of the Zen temple, there was a quiet hum in the air, the soft rustle of monks preparing for the day. Among them was the temple's cook, an elderly monk who had dedicated his life to the simple yet profound art of preparing meals. His name was Jendo, and to the outside world he was nothing more than the man who made the meals. But to the monks who lived within the temple walls, Gendo's presence was as essential as the food he prepared. Gendo's life was devoted to what many would call mundane tasks. He chopped vegetables, stirred pots, cleaned dishes, and prepared rice, all with a focused, deliberate attention. Yet despite the seemingly ordinary nature of his work, there was nothing ordinary about the way he performed it. There was a depth to his actions, a sense of presence that transformed the act of cooking into a meditation. To watch him cook was to witness a form of quiet reverence, a respect for the ingredients, the process, and the act itself. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the temple courtyard, Jendo invited a young novice to join him in the kitchen. The young monk, eager to learn, had been struggling with his practice of meditation. His mind was constantly racing, filled with distractions, and he had been told that meditation would bring him peace. But despite his best efforts, peace always seemed just out of reach. Jendo, sensing the young monk's frustration, decided to teach him a different lesson that day. He handed the novice a knife and asked him to help prepare the vegetables for the morning meal. "Chop the vegetables," Jendo said, "but do so as if you are meditating." The young monk looked puzzled, unsure of what Jendo meant, but he picked up the knife and began to chop. At first, his mind was filled with distractions. He thought about how the vegetables needed to be chopped quickly, how much work was ahead of him, how the other monks might be waiting for their food. But as he continued to chop, something began to shift. The sound of the knife hitting the cutting board became rhythmic, almost like a mantra. The vegetables, once just objects to be prepared, began to take on a new significance. Each chop became an act of mindfulness, each movement filled with intention. Slowly, the young monk's thoughts began to quiet. He stopped thinking about the future, about what he had to do next. He was simply there, fully immersed in the act of chopping, fully present with the knife, the vegetables, and the rhythm of the moment. For the first time in weeks, his mind felt still, his body at ease. He was not trying to meditate, he was simply doing what was before him. And in that simplicity he found peace. When the work was finished, Jendo smiled at the young monk and said, "You have learned the first lesson of Zen. Peace is found not in doing more, but in doing with full attention, in being present with the task at hand. It is the simplest things that bring us the deepest peace. The key is not to seek peace, but to be present with whatever comes your way." The young monk understood then that peace wasn't something to be forced. It was not a distant goal or a destination to reach. It was, instead, a way of being, a way of living fully in each moment. By giving attention to even the most mundane tasks, the act of doing became an act of mindfulness. In those moments, the task itself became the meditation. This lesson, learned through something as simple as chopping vegetables, would stay with the young monk for the rest of his life. It would shape his practice, helping him to see that peace could be found in the most ordinary moments, in the simplest of actions. Whether it was cleaning the floor, washing the dishes, or folding robes, there was a profound peace to be found in those moments of presence. In Zen, there is a saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." The meaning of this saying is simple, yet deeply profound. It is not the task itself that matters, but the way in which we do it. Whether we are chopping wood, carrying water, or washing dishes, these acts are not separate from our practice. They are our practice. The key to finding peace in simplicity is not in doing fewer things, but in doing what we do with full attention, with mindfulness, and with an open heart. We live in a world that often values complexity and achievement. We are told that happiness comes from acquiring more, doing more, and striving for success. But the true peace, the kind that lasts, comes from learning to embrace the simplicity of life. It comes from letting go of the constant need to achieve and instead learning to live fully in the present moment. In the simplicity of our daily tasks, in the quiet moments of life, there is a profound beauty waiting to be discovered. Take a moment to reflect on the simple things in your own life. The act of making a cup of tea, the sound of footsteps on a quiet street, the feeling of the sun warming your skin. These are not trivial moments. They are opportunities for mindfulness, opportunities to be present with life as it is, without the need to change or fix anything. In these moments we can find peace. And yet, we often overlook these moments, dismissing them as unimportant, as mundane. We are too focused on the future, on what comes next, to appreciate the beauty of the present. But the truth is that life is made up of these small, everyday moments, and it is in these moments that we can find the greatest peace. In Zen practice, we are taught to embrace the present moment, to be fully engaged with whatever task we are doing, no matter how small or simple it may seem. It is in the simple, everyday acts that we can cultivate mindfulness and experience the true peace that comes from living in the moment. When we can fully embrace the simplicity of life, we find that there is nothing we need to achieve or acquire. Peace is not something that comes from outside of us. It is something that resides within us, waiting to be uncovered in the quiet, simple moments of our lives. So, the next time you find yourself rushing through the day, distracted by the endless demands of life, take a moment to stop and be present. Notice the small things, the sound of your breath, the feel of the ground beneath your feet, the warmth of the sun on your face. In these moments, you will find that peace is already here, waiting for you to embrace it. The simplicity of life is not something to be overlooked. It is where true peace resides, and it is waiting for you to discover it. The lesson of Jendo, the Zen cook, is one that we can all apply to our lives. Peace is not found in the grand achievements or the extraordinary moments. It is found in the simple acts of living. Whether you are preparing a meal, walking down the street, or washing dishes, these moments are opportunities to practice mindfulness, to be fully present, and to experience the peace that comes with it. So, embrace the simplicity of life. Find peace in the small things, and you will discover that peace is not something you need to seek. It is something you already have, just waiting to be noticed. Letting go of control. The wind howled through the open fields, carrying with it a sense of unease. In a small village nestled in the valley, a farmer stood outside his humble home, looking at the empty field where his prized horse had once grazed. The horse, a powerful creature, had always been a symbol of strength and prosperity for the farmer. It had been his companion for years, helping him with the hard labor that came with working the land. But now the horse was gone. It had run off into the hills during the night, and no one knew where it had gone. At first, the farmer was overcome with panic. The horse was his means of livelihood. Without it, he would struggle to plow the fields, to transport goods, to carry out his daily work. His thoughts raced. What was he going to do now? How would he survive without the horse? It felt like everything he had worked for was slipping through his fingers. As the days passed, the villagers came to him, offering their sympathies. "Such a terrible loss," they said. "How will you manage without the horse?" They spoke in hushed tones, as if the loss of the horse was the end of the farmer's world. But the farmer, in his quiet way, simply nodded and said, "Who knows? Maybe it is not a loss." At first, the villagers thought he was simply trying to comfort himself, to find some solace in the face of adversity. But as time went on, the farmer's calmness remained. He did not dwell on the loss of the horse. Instead, he focused on what he could do, on the work that still needed to be done. He made do with what he had, using his hands and the tools at his disposal. He learned to adapt, to move forward without the horse. Weeks passed, and then one day the farmer's horse returned, bringing with it a herd of wild horses. The animal had not run away as the villagers had assumed. Instead, it had ventured into the hills and found a group of wild horses, becoming part of a new family. The farmer now had not just one horse, but several. What had once seemed like a devastating loss had become an unexpected blessing. The villagers were amazed. They came to the farmer, now full of admiration. "You were right," they said. "What we thought was a loss was actually a gift in disguise." The farmer smiled, but he didn't say much. He knew that life had its own way of working things out, even when it seemed like everything was falling apart. He had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the things we think we need to control are the very things that we must let go of. In letting go of the horse, he had opened the door for something greater to enter his life. This story, though simple, carries with it a powerful lesson about control and surrender. We often find ourselves clinging to things, whether it's a relationship, a job, an outcome, or an expectation. We try to control every aspect of our lives, believing that if we just work harder or plan more meticulously, we can avoid pain, loss, and uncertainty. But the truth is, there are many things in life that are beyond our control. The farmer did not seek to control the situation after his horse ran away. He did not try to force the animal back into his life. Instead, he allowed the circumstances to unfold, and in doing so, he opened himself up to the possibility of something better. In the space created by letting go, he allowed life to take its own course, trusting that things would work out as they were meant to. This lesson is particularly important in today's world, where control has become a central theme of our lives. We live in a culture that encourages us to strive for perfection, to plan every detail of our future, and to avoid uncertainty at all costs. We believe that if we can just control everything, we can avoid pain and achieve happiness. But in reality, the more we try to control, the more we set ourselves up for frustration and disappointment. Control, at its core, is an illusion. We cannot control the weather, the actions of others, or the outcomes of every situation. No matter how hard we try, life will always present us with challenges, with changes, and with losses that we cannot predict. What we can control, however, is how we respond to these changes. We can control our attitude, our perspective, and our willingness to accept the flow of life, no matter how it unfolds. The story of the farmer teaches us that letting go of the need to control is not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength. It is in surrendering to the flow of life that we find the freedom to adapt, to learn, and to grow. When we release our grip on the things we cannot control, we make space for new opportunities to arise. Just like the farmer who found an even greater gift than the one he had lost, we too can discover that what we thought was a setback may actually be the beginning of something better. In Zen, there is a practice called wu-wei, which translates to effortless action or non-action. This is not about being passive or doing nothing. Instead, it is about aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life, acting with purpose and clarity, but without forcing things. It is about finding the balance between action and surrender, between doing and being. In the farmer's case, his willingness to let go of his attachment to the horse allowed him to move with life, to accept what was, and in doing so, he found a new source of abundance. The farmer also teaches us about the importance of trust. He trusted that life would provide, even when it seemed like everything had been taken away from him. He trusted that the loss of his horse was not the end of his story, but a turning point in his journey. And in the end, his trust was rewarded. Life gave him more than he had hoped for. Trust is a key component of letting go. When we let go of the need to control, we are choosing to trust that life knows what is best for us. We are choosing to trust that even in moments of uncertainty, there is a deeper wisdom at work. Trust allows us to move through life with greater ease, to embrace the unknown without fear, and to accept the challenges that come our way as opportunities for growth. The lesson of letting go of control is not an easy one to learn, but it is a necessary one if we are to find peace in our lives. We cannot control everything, and trying to do so only leads to frustration and suffering. But when we learn to let go, when we release our attachment to outcomes and trust in the flow of life, we find that we can move through the world with greater grace, with greater freedom, and with a deeper sense of peace. In the end, the story of the farmer is a reminder that life is unpredictable, and that our attempts to control it are often futile. But when we stop resisting, when we stop trying to force things, we open ourselves up to the possibilities that life has to offer. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but we can trust that there is a purpose, a lesson, and an opportunity in every experience. Let go of the need to control, and you will discover a freedom you never imagined possible. Just like the farmer, you will find that in letting go, you will be given what you truly need, cultivating compassion. There is a story told in the Zen tradition of a teacher who, while traveling through a distant village, encountered a thief. The thief had been notorious in the region, feared by many, and his actions had brought pain and suffering to countless people. One evening, as the teacher made his way through the village, he was approached by the thief, who demanded that he hand over his belongings. The thief's eyes gleamed with the certainty of his power. He had taken from many before, and this teacher, too, would fall victim to his desires. However, the teacher, instead of reacting with fear or anger, looked calmly at the thief and smiled gently. He extended his hand, not to offer his possessions, but to offer something far more valuable, his presence. "Take what you will," the teacher said, "but know this: your actions are not a reflection of who you truly are. Beneath the desire for possession and power, there is something pure, something compassionate waiting to be uncovered." The thief, taken aback by the teacher's words, hesitated. He had expected fear, resistance, or perhaps even violence. But the teacher's compassion, without judgment, disarmed him in a way that no force ever could. In that moment, the thief felt an unfamiliar pang, a longing not for what he could take, but for the peace that the teacher embodied. With a slow breath, the thief let go of his grip on the teacher's belongings and turned away. This story, though simple, highlights the immense power of compassion in the face of adversity. The teacher did not respond to violence with anger, nor did he seek to punish the thief. Instead, he saw beneath the surface of the thief's actions, understanding that his behavior was born not from inherent malice, but from a deep-seated pain and confusion. Compassion, in this sense, was not just an act of kindness. It was an understanding of the thief's suffering and an invitation for him to see his own true nature. In our own lives, we often face situations where others act out of hurt, fear, or misunderstanding. We might encounter hostility, aggression, or negativity, and our natural reaction may be to fight back, to protect ourselves, or to retaliate. But what if, instead of reacting in kind, we could respond with compassion? What if we could look beyond the surface of another's actions and see the suffering that lies beneath? Compassion is not always easy. It requires vulnerability, a willingness to open our hearts, and a readiness to see others not as enemies or obstacles, but as fellow human beings. To truly practice compassion, we must first cultivate it within ourselves. Compassion begins with self-understanding and self-kindness. Only when we can be gentle with ourselves, acknowledging our own flaws and imperfections, can we begin to offer that same gentleness to others. It is easy to be compassionate when things are going well, when others treat us with kindness and respect. But the real test of compassion comes when we are faced with those who do not treat us well, those who are lost in their own pain and suffering. In these moments, compassion becomes a choice, a conscious decision to respond not with anger, but with understanding. Consider the way we often view others. We may see them as adversaries, competitors, or even threats. When someone disagrees with us, or when their actions hurt us, We may feel the impulse to protect ourselves by building walls, by shutting down, or by retaliating. But in these moments, we have a choice. We can choose to see the person as a reflection of our own humanity, someone who, like us, is struggling with their own fears, their own pain. Instead of reacting with judgment or defensiveness, we can choose to respond with compassion, seeing their suffering, understanding their struggles, and offering them the space to heal. Compassion does not mean excusing harmful behavior or allowing ourselves to be mistreated. It means recognizing that the person who hurts us is often acting from their own suffering and responding with kindness and understanding. It is not about condoning actions that cause harm, but about offering a space for healing, both for ourselves and for others. In Zen practice, compassion is often referred to as metta, a word that can be translated as loving kindness or goodwill. Metta is a practice that extends not only to those we love, but to all beings, including those who may have wronged us or caused us harm. It is an open-heartedness that does not discriminate, a deep well of love that does not seek anything in return. Compassion in this sense is limitless. It flows freely, without expectation or condition, and its power to heal and connect us is immeasurable. Imagine that you are walking down a crowded street and someone bumps into you. Your first instinct might be to feel irritated, to judge the person for their lack of consideration. But what if, instead of reacting with frustration, you paused for a moment and asked yourself, what might this person be going through? What might be the source of their stress or distraction? In that brief moment of reflection, you open yourself to compassion. Instead of harboring resentment or anger, you offer understanding. You see them not as an inconvenience, but as another human being who is struggling in their own way. And in doing so, you release yourself from the grip of negative emotion and create space for peace. Compassion also has a transformative effect on the one who practices it. When we respond to others with understanding and kindness, we are not only healing them, we are healing ourselves. Compassion is a mirror that reflects our own humanity back to us. It allows us to see beyond the surface, to connect with others on a deeper level, and to break down the barriers that separate us from one another. In offering compassion, we become more connected, more whole, and more deeply at peace with ourselves and the world around us. But compassion is not just about how we treat others. It is also about how we treat ourselves. How often do we criticize ourselves, judge ourselves, or condemn ourselves for our perceived failures and shortcomings? How often do we allow our inner dialogue to be filled with negativity, self-doubt, and self-criticism? Compassion begins with treating ourselves with the same love and care that we offer to others. It means acknowledging our imperfections, forgiving ourselves for our mistakes, and offering ourselves the kindness and understanding that we deserve. When we practice compassion for ourselves, we become more capable of extending that same compassion to others. We begin to see the world not as a place filled with obstacles and adversaries, but as a place filled with opportunities to heal, to connect, and to love. Compassion opens our hearts and allows us to see the beauty in every person, in every experience, and in every moment. The practice of compassion is a lifelong journey, a journey that requires patience, openness, and a willingness to look beyond the surface of life. It asks us to look at the world with eyes of understanding, to approach every interaction with a heart of kindness, and to recognize the interconnectedness of all beings. It reminds us that we are not separate from one another, but that we are all part of the same great flow of life. Through compassion, we heal the world around us, and in doing so, we heal ourselves. It is the greatest gift we can offer to others, and it is the gift that, in turn, transforms our own lives. Transforming adversity. The morning sun cast long shadows across the barren land. A small village sat at the foot of a mountain, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering peaks. Among the villagers was a man named Akio, a farmer who had spent most of his life tending to the land, growing crops, and caring for his animals. He was a man who lived simply, relying on the rhythms of the earth to sustain him. But life, as it often does, threw him a curveball that would change everything. One year, a harsh drought swept through the region. The crops that Akio had worked so hard to grow withered under the relentless sun, leaving the fields barren. The animals, once plump and healthy, grew thin as the streams that fed them dried up. The village was in crisis, and Akio found himself in a state of despair. His entire livelihood, the foundation of his life, seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. The land that had once been so generous now seemed like an enemy, a harsh reminder of his vulnerability. For days, Akio wandered through the desolate fields, his mind filled with questions. How could he have prepared for such a catastrophe? What was he to do now that his crops were gone and his animals were starving? Each day felt like a battle. He fought against the helplessness that gripped him, but the more he struggled, the more defeated he became. But then, one evening, as he sat on the edge of his dried-up well, staring at the lifeless land, something inside him shifted. He realized that he had been fighting the wrong battle. He had been focused on the loss, the things that had slipped away, and in doing so, he had neglected to see the opportunity that still lay before him. The drought had taken much, but it had also given him something, a chance to adapt, to rethink his approach, and to grow in ways he had never imagined. It was in that moment of quiet reflection that Akio understood a fundamental truth. Adversity, though painful, had the power to shape him. The difficulty he faced was not an obstacle to his happiness. It was the very thing that would lead him to a new path. He could either continue to fight against the situation, clinging to what was lost, or he could embrace the challenge and see it as an opportunity for growth. The next day, Akio set to work with renewed energy. Instead of lamenting the loss of his crops, he began to study the land in a new light. He experimented with new ways to conserve water, learned about drought-resistant plants, and began to build irrigation systems that could help the village during dry seasons. The more he worked, the more he realized that the drought, though difficult, had given him the chance to innovate, to become more resourceful, and to strengthen his resilience. As the weeks passed, the village began to recover. Akio's new methods of farming slowly turned the barren land into something fruitful once again. The crops, though fewer than before, began to grow, and the animals began to thrive once more. Akio had learned the power of adaptability, how adversity could be transformed into opportunity when one shifted their perspective. The drought, in the end, had not been a curse but a lesson, a catalyst for change and growth. This story is a powerful reminder of the lessons that adversity can teach us. Life is unpredictable, and we are often faced with challenges that seem insurmountable. Whether it is the loss of a loved one, a financial setback, a personal failure, or any other hardship, the natural human response is often to fight against it, to resist the pain and the loss. But what if, instead of resisting, we could view these challenges as opportunities? What if we could learn to embrace adversity, not as an obstacle but as a part of our growth? Adversity, when seen through the lens of growth, has the potential to shape us into stronger, more resilient individuals. It is easy to view hardships as something that takes away from us, something that diminishes our chances of happiness or success. But the truth is that these challenges often have the opposite effect. They push us to dig deeper, to innovate, to adapt, and to evolve. They force us to confront our limitations and show us the strength we did not know we had. In order to navigate these difficult times, we must first practice calmness. When we are faced with challenges, our instinct may be to react in fear, to panic, or to become overwhelmed by the situation. But in those moments, the key to moving forward is not in our reaction, but in our response. Instead of allowing ourselves to be swept away by the emotions that adversity stirs in us, we can choose to remain calm, to approach the situation with a clear mind, and to respond with wisdom. This does not mean that we will not feel pain or frustration. It means that we will allow ourselves to feel those emotions without being consumed by them. We can acknowledge the difficulty of the situation, but we do not have to let it define us. By cultivating calmness, we can create the space needed to reflect on the situation, to assess what can be learned from it, and to move forward with clarity and purpose. One of the most powerful ways to transform adversity is by embracing a mindset of possibility. When we face setbacks, we often get trapped in the story of what we've lost, what we've failed at, or what hasn't gone according to plan. But by shifting our focus to what we can learn, what new opportunities exist, and how we can adapt, we open ourselves up to the potential that adversity offers. The struggle itself becomes the lesson, and the lesson becomes the source of our growth. This shift in perspective is not always easy, but it is essential for personal development. When we stop viewing adversity as a threat and start viewing it as an opportunity, we unlock a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. We begin to see challenges not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones on the path of growth. Moreover, when we learn to embrace adversity with calmness and clarity, we also learn to reconnect with our inner power. The ability to remain composed in the face of difficulty is not something that comes naturally to everyone, but it is a skill that can be cultivated. It requires practice, patience, and a willingness to trust in ourselves and in life. We must trust that, no matter what happens, we are capable of handling it, of finding the lesson, and of emerging stronger. In times of hardship, we also need to remember the importance of self-compassion. We often expect ourselves to be perfect, to handle every challenge with grace, and to come out on top. But the reality is that we are human, and we will stumble. In those moments, it is essential to be kind to ourselves, to acknowledge the difficulty of the situation, and to treat ourselves with the same compassion we would offer a friend in need. When we practice self-compassion, we create the space for healing. Instead of pushing ourselves harder, we give ourselves permission to rest, to reflect, and to recharge. And in that rest, we find the strength to face the next challenge with renewed energy and resolve. The key takeaway from adversity is that it does not define us. It refines us. The hardships we face, when embraced and navigated with the right mindset, can become the building blocks of our strength and resilience. They help us grow in ways we may never have imagined and prepare us for the challenges that lie ahead. Just as Akio transformed the barren land into something fruitful, we too have the power to turn our struggles into opportunities for growth. The key lies in our ability to embrace the challenges that come our way, to see them not as burdens but as lessons, and to move through them with calmness, patience, and an open heart. In doing so, we can transform adversity into the very catalyst that propels us forward on our journey of personal development. The path of wisdom. The sun was setting over the distant hills, casting a warm, golden glow across the landscape. In a small village, nestled in a valley between rolling mountains, an old teacher sat quietly in the courtyard of his humble home. His name was Ryota, and for many years he had been known as a wise and compassionate figure. People came from far and wide to seek his guidance, to learn from his years of experience, and to hear his teachings. Yet despite the respect he had earned, Ryota often wondered if he truly understood what wisdom meant. He had spent most of his life studying the great texts, poring over ancient scriptures and philosophical works. His mind was filled with ideas, concepts, and theories, yet something felt incomplete. He had knowledge, yes, but he lacked something deeper. His understanding of life, of human suffering, of the true nature of the world, seemed to be trapped within the confines of what he had read, not something he had truly lived or experienced. One afternoon, a young disciple, eager to learn from the master, approached him with a question. "Master, what is wisdom?" The disciple asked. "You have taught us many things, but what is the true meaning of wisdom?" Ryota looked at the young man, his gaze soft but penetrating. "Wisdom," he said slowly, "is not something you find in books. It is something that comes from life itself, from the experiences you have, from the moments you live through. The texts may guide you, but it is the way you live those teachings that brings true understanding." The disciple, eager to gain insight, asked, "But Master, what do you mean? I have studied so much, read so many texts. Why does wisdom seem so elusive?" Ryota smiled gently, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. You have studied well, but the truth is that knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Knowledge fills the mind with facts, but wisdom fills the heart with experience. The mind can know many things, but the heart must live those truths to understand them fully. He continued, think of it this way. A man who has read all the books about the ocean may know everything about its tides, its depths, and its creatures. But if he has never sailed on the ocean, if he has never felt the salt water on his skin or heard the wind in the sails, his knowledge of the ocean is incomplete. True wisdom comes from being on the water, from feeling the waves beneath you, from experiencing the vastness of the sea. The young disciple listened intently, beginning to understand. Ryota was not dismissing the value of learning, but rather pointing out that knowledge alone, without lived experience, was incomplete. Wisdom, he realized, was about integration, the ability to take what one learns and apply it in the real world, to see the connections between theory and life itself. This is a crucial lesson for all of us. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded with information. We have access to vast amounts of knowledge at our fingertips, from books to online courses, podcasts to videos. But despite all of this information, true wisdom often seems elusive. We may know the facts, we may understand the theory, but we struggle to apply it in our daily lives. The reason for this is simple. Knowledge alone is not enough. To truly embody wisdom, we must integrate what we know with our experiences, our actions, and our hearts. This is where meditation, or mindfulness, plays a crucial role. Meditation is not just about calming the mind or escaping the world for a few moments of peace. It is also about expanding our capacity for understanding, for insight. Through the practice of meditation, we cultivate a mind that is more open, more receptive to the deeper truths that lie beyond words and concepts. Meditation helps us to see the world as it truly is, beyond the filters of our judgments, our preconceptions, and our intellectual knowledge. In Zen practice, there is a saying, "To study the self is to forget the self." At first, this may sound paradoxical. How can we study the self and forget it at the same time? The answer lies in the nature of self-awareness. To truly understand ourselves, we must go beyond the ego, beyond the self-image we have created through our thoughts and beliefs. We must look deeper, beyond the surface, into the heart of who we are. Meditation helps us to do this, by allowing us to observe our thoughts and emotions without attachment, to see them for what they truly are, and to cultivate a sense of stillness that connects us with the present moment. This kind of deep self-awareness is the gateway to wisdom. When we are able to quiet the noise of our minds and look deeply within, we begin to understand not just ourselves, but the world around us. We begin to see the interconnectedness of all things, the way that each moment, each experience, is part of a larger whole. Wisdom is not something that can be grasped by the mind alone. It is something that arises when we are fully present, fully engaged with life, and fully aware of the interconnectedness of all things. This is why Zen meditation is often referred to as a practice of just sitting, or shikantaza, the act of sitting without any particular goal or expectation. In this state, we are not trying to achieve anything or attain some higher level of understanding. We are simply present, allowing our thoughts to arise and fall away without attachment, without judgment. In this stillness, we open ourselves to the deeper wisdom that lies within and around us. The more we practice this kind of mindfulness, the more we begin to see the wisdom in everyday life. We begin to recognize that every moment, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, contains within it the seeds of understanding. Whether we are washing dishes, walking in nature, or having a conversation with a friend, each experience offers an opportunity to gain deeper insight into the nature of reality, the nature of the self, and the interconnectedness of all things. This is the essence of true wisdom, not intellectual knowledge, but the lived experience of life itself. It is the ability to see the world with clarity, to respond to the challenges we face with equanimity and understanding, and to act with compassion and wisdom in every moment. In Zen, we often speak of beginner's mind, the idea of approaching each moment with a fresh perspective, as if we are seeing the world for the first time. This mindset allows us to cultivate a sense of wonder and curiosity, even in the most mundane moments of life. When we approach life with beginner's mind, we are able to let go of our preconceived notions and open ourselves to the fullness of each experience. It is in this openness, this willingness to see things as they are, that wisdom arises. In the end, wisdom is not something we can force or attain through sheer effort. It is something that arises naturally when we cultivate the conditions for it: mindfulness, self-awareness, and a deep connection to the present moment. It is the ability to see beyond the surface, to understand the deeper truths of existence, and to live in harmony with the world around us. As we journey along the path of wisdom, we come to realize that the wisdom we seek is not outside of us. It is not found in books or teachings, but within our own hearts and minds. It is the wisdom of the present moment, the wisdom that arises when we are fully engaged with life, when we see the world through the eyes of a child, and when we approach each moment with open-hearted awareness. In this way, wisdom becomes not just an abstract concept, but a way of life, a way of seeing, of being, and of living in the world with clarity, understanding, and compassion. It is the path we walk every day, in every moment, with each breath we take. The eternal presence. There are moments in life when time seems to stand still, when the world around us becomes silent, and we are left with nothing but the present moment. These moments, fleeting as they are, hold within them a deep, profound stillness, a reminder of the eternal presence that underlies all of existence. In the rush of daily life, we often overlook these moments, caught in the whirlwind of our thoughts, our plans, and our distractions. Yet, if we pause, if we allow ourselves to truly be present, we begin to feel the profound truth that each moment, in its simplicity, contains the eternal. There is a story told of a Zen master who, in his later years, had been sitting in deep meditation for many years, contemplating the nature of existence. One day, as he sat quietly by the edge of a lake, watching the ripples of the water spread out from a single stone, a young disciple approached him and asked, "Master, what is the nature of life? How do we truly understand the meaning of existence?" The Zen master, without saying a word, pointed to the lake. He gestured to the ripples, to the stillness of the water, and then to the sky above. "What do you see?" he asked the disciple. The young man looked at the lake, the sky, the trees surrounding them. "I see the water, the trees, and the sky," he replied. The master smiled, "And beyond all this, what do you feel?" The disciple was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He had learned much in his studies, but now, in the presence of nature's simplicity, he felt a deep stirring within him, something he could not quite grasp. The Zen master then spoke softly. "What you see and feel are but the surface ripples. Beneath them lies the eternal presence, the stillness from which all things arise and to which they return. It is the quiet force that holds the universe together, the space in which life unfolds." The young disciple sat quietly, his mind racing, trying to comprehend the master's words. But as he sat by the lake, he began to feel something profound stir within him. He realized that the stillness of the lake, the quiet of the trees, the vastness of the sky, were not separate from him. They were part of him, part of the world in which he existed. And in that realization, he understood: life itself is not something that happens in the future or the past. It happens now, in the eternal presence of each moment. This is the heart of Zen, the understanding that life is not about chasing after something, be it success, happiness, or meaning, but about being fully present in the now, in the simplicity of each moment. The present is not just a fleeting moment that we pass through on our way to something else. It is the only true reality we have, and it is filled with the eternal. We often think of eternity as something far away, something beyond our grasp. We think of it as a distant concept, something that will come later, after life. But in truth, eternity is not separate from us. It is woven into every moment of our lives. It is in the stillness of a quiet morning, the warmth of a hug, the sound of a bird's song. It is present in every breath we take, in every step we make. The challenge is not to seek the eternal outside of ourselves, but to recognize it within each moment. The beauty of life is that the eternal is not hidden away. It is right here, right now, waiting to be seen, waiting to be experienced. But to see it, we must first learn to slow down, to stop rushing through life, to let go of our endless striving. Only then can we fully appreciate the present moment and the eternal presence it holds. True presence is not a concept to be understood intellectually. It is a way of being, a way of living in harmony with the world. It is the ability to engage with life as it is, without judgment, without expectation, without fear. It is the awareness that each moment, no matter how simple or mundane, is an opportunity to connect with the deeper currents of existence. In this connection, we find peace. To truly live in the eternal presence, we must practice being fully present in each moment, allowing ourselves to experience life as it is, without the need to change it, control it, or manipulate it. This is where the power of mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness is not just about being aware of the present moment. It is about being fully engaged with it, about immersing ourselves in the richness of life as it unfolds. It is about noticing the smallest details, the way the light shifts across the room, the sound of the wind in the trees, the taste of food in our mouths, and recognizing that these are not just trivial things. They are the essence of life, the expression of the eternal in the here and now. In every moment, we are presented with the opportunity to live in the present, to experience the eternal. And yet so often we are distracted, pulled away by our thoughts, our worries, and our fears. We chase after the future, lament the past, and forget that the only reality we truly have is the present. We forget that it is in the present that we find peace, that we find connection, and that we find the eternal. To live in the eternal presence is to let go of our attachments to the past and the future. It is to release our need to control, to judge, and to seek meaning outside of ourselves. When we do this, we begin to see the world with new eyes. We begin to notice the beauty in the simple things, the way the light plays on the leaves, the feeling of the wind on our skin, the stillness in the air. And in these moments, we realize that we are not separate from the world, but an integral part of it, connected to everything that exists. The lesson of the eternal presence is a lesson of surrender. It is the surrender of the need to control time, the surrender of the need to chase after things, and the surrender of the need to always be doing. In surrendering, we open ourselves to the fullness of life. We allow the present moment to be enough, to be all that we need. And in that surrender, we find peace. This is the final lesson of life, that peace is not something we find in the future or in the past, but in the present. It is not something we acquire or achieve, but something we recognize in every moment. And in recognizing it, we return to the eternal presence that has always been with us. As we move through life, let us remember to live in the present, to be fully present in each moment. Let us release our attachment to time, to the need to control, and to the need to be somewhere else. Let us open ourselves to the eternal presence that lies within each moment, and let that presence guide us to peace. In doing so, we will find that life is not something we have to chase after or strive for. It is something we are already living. And in that realization, we will find the peace we have always sought. The journey of self-discovery and awakening. Throughout the story, we are introduced to a profound exploration of Zen teachings and their applicability to everyday life. From the first breath to the final lesson, this journey reveals that true peace and wisdom come not from external achievements or possessions, but from within. It is a path that leads us toward a deeper understanding of ourselves, our connection to others, and the eternal presence that underlies everything. The journey begins with the recognition of the power of the present moment, the simple act of being present with what is. In a world where distractions are constant and the pressure to achieve is ever present, we often find ourselves lost in the past or the future, always striving for something outside ourselves. The first lesson taught to us is that peace does not lie in a distant goal or a future accomplishment, but in the here and now. Through the teachings of Zen and the stories of the characters, we learn that the key to finding peace is not to seek it externally, but to recognize it in the simplicity of every moment. The narrative also guides us through the concept of impermanence, which lies at the heart of life itself. The story of the ginkgo tree, shedding its leaves in the autumn, reminds us that everything in life is temporary. We face losses, we experience change, and we are constantly moving through cycles of growth and decay. The loss of the horse in the farmer's life serves as another example of impermanence. What we may perceive as a loss may, in fact, be a new beginning. The challenge, then, is not to cling to what we cannot keep but to accept the natural flow of life. By embracing the impermanence of all things, we are freed from the fear of loss, and we can open ourselves to the opportunities that come from letting go. One of the most profound lessons in this journey is the understanding that wisdom is not found in intellectual knowledge alone, but through lived experience. The Zen master's insight about wisdom reveals that the true depth of knowledge is not measured by what we read or what we learn, but by how we apply it to our lives. Knowledge becomes wisdom when it is integrated into our experiences and actions. It is the difference between knowing about the ocean and actually sailing on it. We gain wisdom not by accumulating facts, but by living the teachings in our daily actions, through simple, mindful activities that open us to a deeper understanding of life. In this story, we are also taught the importance of compassion, not just as an emotion, but as a practice that transcends judgment and extends to all beings. The story of the Zen master and the thief exemplifies how compassion can transform both the giver and the receiver. When we respond with compassion, we create an opening for healing, understanding, and connection. Compassion is not merely about giving but also about seeing others through the lens of empathy, understanding that their actions come from their own struggles, fears, and pain. It is about recognizing the shared humanity in others, even in their most challenging moments. This compassion, when practiced consistently, becomes an energy that nourishes both ourselves and those around us. The path to wisdom and peace is not without its challenges. Life presents us with adversities that are unavoidable, but these difficulties do not have to be sources of despair. The story of the farmer who faced the drought and eventually transformed his hardship into an opportunity for growth shows us that adversity, when approached with the right mindset, can be a powerful catalyst for personal transformation. When we let go of the need to control the uncontrollable and instead choose to embrace the challenges, we find opportunities to grow stronger, more resilient, and more adaptable. In doing so, we allow the difficulties to refine us, shaping us into the people we are meant to become. The journey concludes with the realization that the true path to peace is through presence, the deep, eternal presence that exists in each moment. The Zen master's teachings remind us that peace is not something we acquire, but something we awaken to. It is already present within us, always accessible.